There's a pattern in history that has destroyed 3 global superpowers in the last 500 years. And right now, in 2025, the United States is following that exact same pattern. Stage by stage, decision by decision. It's almost like we're rereading from the same script that led to catastrophe every single time before. In 1590, Spain was the richest empire on earth. They controlled half the world's gold and silver. Their military dominated Europe. Their currency was accepted everywhere. Within 80 years, they were bankrupt, a second-rate power that never recovered. In 1914, Britain ruled the largest empire in human history. The sun never set on British territory. The pound sterling was the global reserve currency. Within 40 years, the empire was gone. The currency collapsed. They became America's junior partner. In 1991, the Soviet Union was the other superpower. Nuclear weapons, global influence, satellites spanning the globe. It ceased to exist in 900 days. Not from war, but from economic implosion. 3 times. 3 superpowers. 3 complete collapses, all following the exact same sequence. And here's what should concern you. The United States has already completed 5 of the 7 stages. We're not approaching the pattern, we're deep inside it. This is the story of how empires die, why they always think they're different, and why the math says we're next. And it's happening faster than anyone wants to admit. Before we go through the pattern, you need to understand what imperial collapse actually looks like. Not in textbooks, but in practice. What it means when a superpower dies. Imperial collapse doesn't start with an invasion or a military defeat. It starts with economic exhaustion. The empire extends beyond its ability to maintain itself. Military bases in 150 countries. Wars on multiple fronts. Promises it cannot keep. Debts it cannot repay. At first, the decline is invisible. The currency still works. The military still wins battles. The government still makes promises. But beneath the surface, the foundation is cracking. Resources are misallocated. Productive capacity shrinks. The best and brightest leave. Then comes the acceleration. Allies start hedging. Enemies test boundaries. Trade partners seek alternatives. The reserve currency status erodes. And suddenly, the advantages that made you powerful become vulnerabilities. Your currency, once demanded by everyone, comes flooding back home. Your military, spread across the world, becomes unsustainable. Your promises, once guaranteed by strength, become empty words. That's not theoretical. That's what happened to Spain, Britain, and the Soviet Union. And it happened because they made exactly the same decisions we're making now. They believed their power was permanent. They overextended militarily. They debased their currency, and they refused to accept reality until collapse was already underway. Let's look at how it actually happened. 3 times, the exact same way. Let's start with the first global empire, Spain, from the 1500s to the 1600s. This is the original blueprint. After Columbus discovered the Americas in 1492, Spain became the first true world power. They conquered the Aztec and Inca empires, seizing control of the richest gold and silver mines ever discovered. By 1550, Spanish galleons were bringing home 200 tons of silver per year. By 1600, over 400 tons annually. Spain controlled the money supply of Europe. The Spanish real was the global reserve currency. Everyone wanted Spanish silver. And this is where the pattern begins, with a country that controls the money of the world and believes that makes them invincible. King Philip II, ruling from 1556 to 1598, had more money than any monarch in history, and he spent it on empire. Stage 1, military overextension. Spain fought wars everywhere simultaneously. Against the Ottoman Empire in the Mediterranean, against France in Italy, against Protestant rebels in the Netherlands, against England's navy, wars in the Philippines, wars in the Americas. By 1580, Spain had military commitments on 4 continents. The cost was staggering. Half of Spain's revenue went to the military. And still, it wasn't enough. Stage 2, currency debasement. The Spanish crown couldn't pay its bills with taxes alone. So, they did what every failing empire does. They debased the currency. They started mixing copper into their silver coins. A coin that was supposed to be pure silver became 50% copper, then 75% copper. The face value stayed the same, but the real value plummeted. By 1600, Spanish silver coins contained barely any silver. Merchants stopped accepting them at face value. Inflation exploded. Stage 3, debt spiral. Spain borrowed constantly. From Italian bankers, from German bankers, from anyone who would lend. By 1557, less than 20 years into Philip's reign, Spain declared bankruptcy. They defaulted on their debts, restructured, and just kept borrowing. They declared bankruptcy again in 1560. Again in 1575, again in 1596. 4 bankruptcies in 40 years. Each time, they promised reforms. Each time, they went right back to borrowing and spending. Stage 4, loss of productive capacity. Here's what people do want to understand about Spain's collapse. They had all the gold and silver in the world, and it destroyed them. Because when you have unlimited money, you stop producing. Why grow food when you can import it? Why build ships when you can buy them? Why innovate when you can just spend? Spanish nobility considered work beneath. Manufacturing declined. Agriculture stagnated. All the wealth flowed to importing goods from other countries. The gold and silver that came from the Americas went straight back out to pay for French wine, Italian silk, Dutch goods. Spain became a conduit. Wealth flowed through them, but none of it stayed. By 1600, Spain was producing almost nothing. They were entirely dependent on imports, entirely dependent on silver to pay for everything. And when the silver mines began to deplete, when production dropped, the entire system collapsed. Stage 5. Social decay. With the economy failing, crime exploded. Beggars filled the streets of Madrid. Productive citizens immigrated. The best minds left for France, England, the Netherlands, countries that were building, creating, and growing. Spain was left with bureaucrats, soldiers, and priests. No one was creating wealth, everyone was consuming it. By 1640, Spain lost Portugal. By 1650, they lost the Netherlands, their richest territory. By 1700, the Spanish Empire was a shell. Still large on paper, but economically dead. They went from the world's superpower to a secondary power in less than a century, and they never recovered. Spain today is a regional European country, pleasant, cultured, but irrelevant on the world stage. The descendants of the Spanish conquistadors are now a tourist destination. That's what imperial collapse looks like. Let's jump forward 300 years to Britain in the 1900s. The empire where the sun never set. At its peak, Britain controlled a quarter of the world's land and ruled over 400 million people. The pound sterling was the global reserve currency. Every major trade contract was priced in pounds. Every central bank held British bonds. London was the financial heart of the world. And just like Spain 300 years earlier, they thought it would last forever. But they were already walking down a familiar path. Stage 1. Military overextension. By 1900, Britain had military commitments everywhere: India, Africa, the Middle East, China, the Pacific, the Caribbean. They were defending territory on 6 continents. The cost was astronomical. When World War I broke out in 1914, Britain faced a stark choice: stay neutral and watch Europe tear itself apart, or jump in and bankrupt the empire to secure victory. They chose to fight. The war cost Britain over $40 billion, which is $1 trillion in today's money. They borrowed from everyone, mostly the United States. By 1918, Britain, once the world's creditor, was now a debtor to America. They'd won the war and kept the empire, thinking they could rebuild. They were wrong. Stage 2. Currency debasement. The pound was supposed to be backed by gold, but the war had drained Britain's reserves. They had shipped their gold to America to pay for weapons and supplies. By 1920, their gold reserves were half of what they were in 1914. Yet, they tried to maintain the pound's value, going back on the gold standard at the pre-war rate in 1925. The problem? The pound was now massively overvalued. British exports became too expensive, manufacturing collapsed, and unemployment soared. The government had to keep interest rates high to defend the currency, which crushed the domestic economy. By 1931, they couldn't hold on any longer. Britain abandoned the gold standard. The pound lost 25% of its value overnight. The global reserve currency had just admitted it couldn't keep its promises. Stage 3. A debt spiral. Britain never recovered from its World War I debt. Then, World War II started, adding another $120 billion in costs. More borrowing from America. By 1945, Britain's debt to the US and Canada was more than its entire GDP. The war was won, but the empire was finished. They couldn't afford to defend it, maintain it, or hold on to it. Stage 4. Loss of empire. In 1947, Britain gave up India, the crown jewel and a source of immense wealth, for 200 years. It was gone. Over the next 2 decades, they lost everything else: Africa, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, the Caribbean. By 1970, the British Empire existed only in history books. Stage 5. Currency collapse. The pound kept falling. In 1940, £1 was worth $4. By 1980, it was barely $2. Today, it's about $1.27. The world's reserve currency had become a regional one. Britain tried to maintain the pretense of power with a permanent seat on the UN Security Council and nuclear weapons. But everyone knew the truth. They were a former power, a museum of past greatness. The empire was gone, and it never came back. Now, let's look at a more recent example: the Soviet Union. From 1945 to 1991, the USSR emerged as a superpower. They had nuclear weapons, a massive military, and control over Eastern Europe. They believed communism was the future and would bury capitalism. For 45 years, they competed with America, matching them militarily, building more tanks, missiles, and troops. But beneath the surface, their economy was dying. Stage 1. Military overextension. The Soviet Union spent 15 to 20% of its GDP on the military triple. What America spent, they had to match American technology and global reach. They were bogged down in Afghanistan, propping up Cuba, supporting regimes in Syria, Vietnam, and North Korea. The cost was completely unsustainable for an economy a fraction of the size of America's. Stage 2. Economic stagnation. The Soviet economy stopped growing in the 1970s. Oil revenue kept them afloat, but everything else failed. Factories produced junk. Farms failed. Technology fell decades behind. By the 1980s, the Soviet Union, a country with some of the best farmland on earth, was importing grain. It couldn't even feed itself. Why? Because central planning doesn't work. Innovation dies under rigid control, and nobody produces when there's no incentive. Stage 3. Currency collapse. The ruble was never a real international currency. Even Soviet citizens didn't trust it, preferring dollars. The government had to use gold and oil to buy foreign goods because nobody wanted rubles. When oil prices crashed in 1985, their gold reserves dwindled. They were running out of real money. Stage 4. Loss of empire. In 1989, the Berlin Wall fell. Eastern Europe broke free. Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia all gone within a year. The buffer states that gave the Soviet Union strategic depth just vanished. The Soviet government was broke and powerless to stop it. Stage 5. Complete collapse. On December 26, 1991, the Soviet Union ceased to exist. It took only 900 days from the fall of the Berlin Wall to complete dissolution. No war, no invasion, just an economic implosion. The military couldn't be paid, the government couldn't function, and the ruble became worthless. A superpower with 30,000 nuclear weapons collapsed from internal economic failure. The pattern is clear: military overextension, currency failure, crushing debt, loss of empire, and finally, collapse. And here's the part that should keep you up at night. The United States is following the exact same pattern, stage by stage. Let me show you. Stage 1. Military overextension. The United States has over 750 military bases in 80 countries. We have troops in 150 nations. We're committed to defending Europe through NATO, defending Japan, South Korea, and the Philippines, all while fighting in the Middle East and trying to counter both China and Russia. Our military budget is $850 billion a year more than the next 10 countries combined, and it's still not enough. We are stretched thin. Our equipment is aging, recruitment is down, and we have commitments we simply can't fulfill. If China invades Taiwan, while Russia pushes into NATO territory and Iran closes the Persian Gulf, we can't respond to all of that at once. We are overextended. Just like Spain, just like Britain, just like the USSR. Check. Stage 2. Currency debasement. In 1971, Nixon closed the gold window, and the dollar became a pure fiat currency, backed by nothing but faith. Since the year 2000, the money supply has increased by 400%. And since 2020 alone, we've printed over $6 trillion. The dollar has lost 98% of its purchasing power since 1971. We're not mixing copper into silver coins. We're just printing unlimited paper. The mechanism is different. The result is the same. Debasement check. Stage 3. Debt spiral. The United States owes $36 trillion. That's 120% of GDP. Interest payments alone are approaching $1 trillion per year. We're spending more on interest than on defense. We run deficits every year. $1.8 trillion in 2024 in a growing economy. During peacetime, we borrowed to pay interest on previous borrowing. That's the definition of a debt spiral. Spain defaulted 4 times. Britain borrowed until it collapsed. The USSR ran out of money. We're on the same path. Check. Stage 4. Loss of productive capacity. America doesn't make things anymore. We design, we finance, we consume, but we don't produce. Our manufacturing base has been gutted. Shipped to China, Mexico, Vietnam. We import $800 billion more than we export annually. We're dependent on foreign supply chains for everything. Medicine, electronics, steel, even military components. Just like Spain became dependent on imports while the silver flowed out, we're dependent on imports while dollars flow out. And just like Spain, when the money stops flowing, we're in trouble. Check. Stage 5. Social decay. Trust in institutions is at all-time lows. Crime is rising. Homelessness is exploding. Drug overdoses kill 100,000 Americans annually. The best and brightest are leaving or checking out. Fertility rates are collapsing. Political dysfunction is total. We can't agree on anything. Can't fix anything. Can't build anything. The signs of decay are everywhere, but everyone pretends it's fine. It's not fine. Check. We're on stage 5 of 7. The Soviet Union made it to stage 5 before complete collapse. So did Britain. Spain lasted longer, but the pattern is the same. We're not at the end yet, but we're deep into the sequence. Stage 6 is loss of reserve currency status. That's when allies start diversifying, when trade moves to other currencies, when the dollar comes flooding back home because no one needs to hold it anymore. We're seeing early signs. BRICS nations developing alternatives. Central banks buying gold. China and Russia trading in yuan and rubles. Saudi Arabia accepting yuan for oil. The cracks are forming. Stage 7 is collapse. Not gradual decline. Sudden implosion. The Soviet Union went from superpower to non-existent in 900 days. Britain lost the empire in 20 years. Spain took longer. But the result was the same. When the reserve currency fails, when the debt becomes impossible, when the military can't be funded, it doesn't decline gracefully. It collapses quickly, brutally. And everyone who thought it couldn't happen here learns the same lesson every empire learns. It can, and it does. 3 empires followed this pattern. Spain, Britain, the USSR, each believed they were exceptional. Each believed they were different. Each believed the rules didn't apply to them. Well, they were wrong every single time. We're telling ourselves the same lies right now. We're different. We have technology. We have the dollar. We're America. But the pattern doesn't care about exceptionalism. The pattern is mathematical. You cannot spend beyond your means forever. You cannot maintain empire without productive capacity. You cannot debase your currency without consequences. You cannot avoid stage 6 and 7 once you've completed 1 through 5. The sequence is locked in. The only question is timing. Maybe we have 10 years, maybe 5, maybe less. But the pattern says collapse is coming. And when it comes, it won't be slow. It'll be sudden. A currency crisis that triggers a debt crisis that triggers a political crisis. Overnight, the superpower becomes a cautionary tale. The reserve currency becomes a regional currency. The empire becomes a memory. 3 times it happened before. The pattern says, we're next. Since 2020, we've accelerated every stage, printed more money, increased more debt, extended military commitments, hollowed out production, fractured society. We're not walking the path anymore. We're sprinting down it. And the end is visible if you know the pattern. Maybe we'll find a way out. Maybe America can do what Spain, Britain, and the Soviet Union couldn't. Maybe we'll reform, rebuild, restore. Maybe this time really is different. But the pattern says otherwise. The math says otherwise. And history, which has watched empires die the same way over and over, says we're about to learn the lesson the hard way. If this opened your eyes to where we actually are in the sequence, subscribe, because when we hit stage 6 and 7, you'll want to understand what happened and why. The answers aren't hiding in the future. They're written in the past. And I'll show you where to look.